when I talk about failure with people, and I've had other failures as well in my life, it's important to recognize that failure is good. Failure helps you. It teaches you. Sometimes failure is permanent. Sometimes it's not permanent.
Meet Matthew Dickerson, a relentless entrepreneur who transformed a garage startup into Tension, a global leader in architectural shade sales. Now he's revolutionizing the home services industry with Tdoozs, an app that lets you book vetted providers in seconds. No calls, no quotes, just service. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you.
This is awesome.
So awesome to be here.
And I got through it.
You did. It was fantastic. Everything was clean and pronunciated right.
Just so everybody knows what we're talking about, I was like, in the intro, it says architectural shade sales. And I was like, okay, say that 10 times in a row. I don't know if I can get that, but I got it. So we're good. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on here. So I want to talk a little bit about Tdoozs first. Okay. So it's a really cool app. I've used it. Tell us a little bit about the app itself so viewers have an understanding of what it is, what it does.
Yeah, the most generic, we talked about this before, the most generic explanation is Uber for home services. So Tdoozs is an app where you can schedule home services in seconds. So there's lots of apps currently on the market that are in, I would say, the general niche. You think of Angie and Thumbtack and TaskRabbit, but all of these apps, they have some fatal flaws in my opinion. I wanted something that was really convenient to schedule. I wanted convenience and trust and speed to be the number one priorities. So Tdoozs is literally an app where at-home services like pest control, pressure washing, window cleaning, kind of your traditional house cleaning, your traditional services can be present on the app. Someone can schedule something in about 30 seconds. And then at the point of scheduling, all of the vetted vendors, as you said in the opening, all get a text and an email, and the first vendor to grab the job is paired to perform the job.
Yeah, I love that. It's so fast. It's so easy. You want to throw up that website really quick? You've had some fun skits that I've seen talking about kind of what the app does. Because I know, I think at first when we first talked about it, it was kind of a bit hard to grasp what it was. And then when you showed me and I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. And then I tried it out and I was like, this was easy. I ordered my windows to be cleaned in I mean, literally 20 seconds or so. It was faster to order that than it was to go on and read a review from some other companies.
Yes.
And I love that.
And that's what I try to explain to people is, and it's not for everyone. And just like any service, right? Any business, it's not necessarily fit everyone. But for those that care way more about their time and the convenience of something being scheduled, and are willing to turn over to a business the process of vetting and booking and managing, there isn't anything like it. It just doesn't exist out there.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, it's what I think most people, especially the rising home buyer, the rising consumer, your millennial, Gen Z, even your Gen Xer like I am, this is how I want to book a service. Right. I don't want to go read reviews for hours and hours and hours, or have someone come give me a quote and then have them get some markup because they see my house or whatever it is. I just want to be able to book something based on a specific input.
Yeah, I think there's some people like they want to spend the hours reviewing and asking friends and doing all that and like spend 10 hours to try to find somebody to wash windows. And I get that. And there's others who are like, I'm busy. I just want the windows clean and I don't really want to deal with it. I got 20 seconds here. I'll do that part. But other than that, I got to go about my life.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
And so I understand that.
Yeah.
How did you get into, like, where did the idea come from for this type of app?
Yeah. So, like lots of ideas, I would say good ideas come from necessity. So I lived in Arizona. I owned a different company at the time, and I was really just a really busy entrepreneur. But I had a pretty large home and a pretty large piece of property, and I had taken care of all of my land. So it was about an acre, a little over, a little under, but it had about 3,000 plants. So lots of hedges and trees, and I just kind of had that English garden thing going. And I took care of all of it with the help of my kids and wife, but mostly me. So from about 6 in.the morning till, depending on the day, 6 to 8 o'clock at night, every single Saturday, that is all I did.
Wow.
And and some people probably are thinking, oh, because it was therapeutic. No, it was not therapeutic. People assumed I liked it. In fact, so much to the point where I had neighbors that would drive up. I remember one time a neighbor drove up in their Range Rover and rolled down the window, and I'm all dressed in landscaping gear and the big hat and everything. They're like, hey, excuse me, can I get your card? And I thought, oh, this is too funny. I should really lean in heavy to this. But I was like, oh, and I said, actually, this is my house. I'm like, I'm so sorry. We're like, but oh, don't worry about it. And they're like, well, you do a great job. I'm like, thanks. They're like, do you do it for other? No, I don't do it for others. So, but I was so busy doing this all of the time. And I just, because I wanted it done right.
Yeah.
And I finally got to the point where I said to my wife, I'm like, okay, I can't keep doing this every single Saturday. It's killing me, like literally killing me. I'm exhausted.
It's a lot of time.
It's a lot of time. And there are parts of it that are enjoyable and fun, but for the most part, it was too much. So one Saturday I was just sitting there. I'm like, okay, I'm done. So I sat down in the shade and I got on my phone. And I start texting all of my neighbors. And the same experience we've all had, right? Where I said, hey, who's your landscaper? I got to get someone to come do this. Those that did respond, most didn't, right? Most just were busy and just didn't even ever respond to it. But those that did are like, oh, mine's not very good. I don't think I'm going to refer mine to you. Okay. Or, well, I think mine's going to stop doing it now, or my cousin is whatever, or just kind of random comments on things like that. And so what I tried to figure out was no one was going to give me a good answer there. So then I went online and I started reading reviews and doing the thing we all do, going on Yelp, going on Google, going on Angie's List, and trying to find a provider. And hours are going by and I'm really no closer. I finally find a landscaper who comes and does an awful job, cuts through a bunch of my low volt wire, damages bushes. I end up firing him and I'm back in the same place. So during this time of this kind of stress, I had to take a business trip and I was in California. I believe it's San Francisco. That's how I've been retelling it, but because I was there in Silicon Valley area on a trip, and I was at the airport booking an Uber. So I'm at the airport booking this Uber, and with this problem fresh in my mind, and that light bulb went off in my head, and I went, oh, this is how this needs to happen. So I made a note on my phone and I said, when I get back, I'm going to go find the app that exists, because clearly it exists, that does this already. Somebody did it. And I went back and no one did it. I found Angie, Thumbtack, TaskRabbit, but those, if you've ever used those platforms, they're great for what they do, but it's a click funnel that then leads you to a big list of vendors. Then you still have work to do. Some services like Thumbtack will list prices. Some will list price ranges. Angie typically will give you contractor lists that you can then get a quote from. But I didn't want work to do. I wanted to just get someone to, based on the size of my yard, someone to come do my landscaping or do my windows. So I tabled the idea because I didn't have a lot of time with my current company then. I kind of toyed around a little bit with things, but I ultimately just didn't do anything with it. And then I moved here, and we'll probably talk about that company here in a little bit, but I moved here running my company remote and then sold it about a year later. And after that time, so I'm now probably 2 years ago now, I kind of went, all right, well, what am I going to do now? And I had some property up on Kolob up in the mountains north of Zion, and I set up basically taking care of the property. So I went up and put a Bobcat and a backhoe on the property and was digging water lines and building a road and building a pad for a cabin and all this stuff, until I had kind of this Forrest Gump moment. Where, remember that scene in Forrest Gump near Monument Valley where he's running and he's got that entourage behind him and he just stops and he says, I think I'll go home now. I was in a Bobcat and I was like, I turned it off and went, I think I'll build a business now. And I kind of just finished up what I was doing. We sold that property, and I've been working on this ever since. Because it just was a need that didn't exist. And even 2 years ago when I revisited it, still no one was doing it the way that I wanted it to happen.
I know when we were talking about it a little while ago, you were like, surely by now somebody has created it, because they hadn't before when you first had the idea, and then you looked and it still wasn't out there.
Yeah, and there's lots of complication to it. It's not an easy thing. The idea is not novel. I mean, you think of like DoorDash and Uber and Instacart and lots of services like that have a similar type of model. It's not a novel idea, but as applied to home services, I have yet to find anybody who has done it the way that we're striving to do it with the software that we're building. It just doesn't exist that I can see.
Yeah. So. What's it been like on the software development side? Because it's a big undertaking too.
It is I grossly underestimated that. I think, like you, I've had lots of ventures throughout my life, like both of you. I've had lots of ventures throughout my life. And most of the companies I've had have been manufacturing, internet-based, I've owned a marketing agency. I've had lots of things that are hands-on, tactile. Software build is a totally different world. And I have an amazing team. So one of the important things for me was I wanted an in-house dev team. So I've got seven as of a couple days ago, members of the dev team now, with all ranges of full stack development capabilities, because I wanted to be able to at least have as much of that hands-on interaction as I could. I didn't want to do an overseas development. I didn't want to just give someone an assignment and have them deliver me something 3 months later. But it has been a 2-year process. I mean, I'm not a web developer. I mean, my background is as a lawyer, right? And an entrepreneur, but I don't have any web development experience at all. And so I'm trying, at the beginning, I was trying to figure out, how do I even make this happen? And I was fortunate that an old friend of mine lives here in town. And so we sat down, and he's owned a couple of startups. In fact, gosh, what is the name of his company? I can't think of it off the top of my head. Maybe it'll come to me. But he founded here in town with another partner, and they sold that a few years ago. But he's had a lot of web experience, and so he built a web app for me. So I took the concept that I had, and a web app, for those that don't know, because I didn't know, there's a difference between a web app and an iOS Android app. So a web app is effectively a website that functions like an application that we would think of today on your phone. So the first version was just an application that looked and felt like a iOS or Android app, but it was actually pulling from the web back and forth constantly, unlike an iOS or Android app that lives native on your phone. So we built that first because it's much easier to iterate with something like that. And so we did that, worked on that for about 6 months. And then after that 6 months, I realized, okay, good, I proved what I needed. I had about 250, 300 beta users with the web application. And then that's when I immediately brought on all the dev team, and we started working on iOS and Android and launched it about a month and a half ago.
That's awesome.
Wow, that's awesome. And I know it's funny. We've done a little bit, some minor software stuff, and it's like we would test and test and test and test. And you would think like, okay, I found everything. And then you deploy it and you're like, oh, there's the one I guess I didn't.
This morning that happened, right? This morning there was a functionality that I thought existed, and I didn't know it didn't exist because I hadn't had that problem yet. Until I went in and had that problem. I was like, hey, why can't I do this? Oh, we didn't put that in there. I'm like, well, that's like, we have a kind of a ranking system in Slack of problems when they come up and bug fixes. There's high, medium, and low. And I said, this is nuclear. So we don't have that option, but I need you to do this now. Like, this is really critical now for operations. Because dev guys aren't operations guys. They're not business guys. Right. And so some of them have a little bit of an understanding of that, but they're focused on creating the thing that you're instructing them to create, and they don't necessarily see all the reasons why. I mean, they're really good at building all the interfaces and the interplay between a database and a front end, but as far as interacting with the customer and the UI UX side of things, user interface, user experience, for those that don't know that, that's less of their wheelhouse.
For sure. And the way I always like explain it to some people is like, if you're building a house, there's a designer, and then there's someone that actually builds it.
Yes.
Right. And the two have to work together, but they're two completely different roles.
Totally.
And so that the person who builds it, like, here's the task list, start from the top, go to the bottom.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily looking at how everything interacts together,
Absolutely.
and that's where the designers are.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yep. That's awesome. And I didn't know you had your team here.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah. I've got, of the 7, there's 2 that are remote, but remote, one's in Florida, one's up north, Salt Lake area, but all the rest are here, like in St. George here.
Yeah,
that was really important to me. I operate really well. Maybe it's the ADHD, but I operate really well in person with people. I struggle when I'm sitting at a desk and I'm trying to create a list of tasks for someone else to do, because my own mind starts to wander, but I can work really well in flow when I'm in conversation. I'm like, okay, so this one thing, let's talk about this. Okay, someone writing that down, I think good. And then, because I can just see all of these things, but when I'm having to sit there and I'm like, okay, task 1. My watch is dirty. Like, okay, it's just too much on my brain, which is a superpower in a way in entrepreneurship, because it's really helpful to see all the things all at once. I know, we talked about that earlier, right? The swirls. It really is a superpower. People don't think that way. If you can harness it, it's fantastic. But if you have a complete inability to focus, it's of no good to you, because you're just running around chasing squirrels.
Yeah. you just see all of these ideas everywhere. And you're like, oh, there's one. And you can't work on all of them.
No, you got to have the capital or capacity to take care of things or put people in charge.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get into entrepreneurship? Has this kind of always been something as being a kid, or how did you get into that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've always been wired that way. I come from a family of attorneys. So my life path, there were really 2.5 acceptable life choices. Yes. Doctor, lawyer,
engineer,
accountant. No, engineer was, those were weird people. There was literally a doctor, a lawyer, and like half of an answer was accountant. Like, I guess you could be an accountant. Like, yes, but they kind of just serve the needs of doctors and lawyers. Like that was kind of how I saw the world. That was the framework that I had. And at least that's how kind of my upbringing was. In fact, it's funny. I was at a family gathering a few years back, and I was with not all my cousins, but all the cousins that were there. I was sitting on the couch next to my grandfather who just passed a few months ago. And I was looking around and I realized that every single husband of every single man in the room, they all had doctorates. Everyone in that room was a doctor, a lawyer, or a dentist. Every person in the room.
It was like a fun crowd.
And I said to my grandma, that's kind of cool. Look at your posterity, like that all these people, that's what they did. And some of these are not like just barely MD. Some of them are like, one of them was a neonatal cardiovascular surgeon. Like it's all overachieving, to a ridiculous level. One of them was an architect and was a lawyer. Like it was just, so it's just kind of, that was my past. That was always kind of what I thought, but I was never really, again, maybe it was my desire. Like I just saw so much opportunity in business, but it was never really how I was wired. And so I owned a couple small internet companies when I was a teenager, and then into college. I started a shoe company. Well, it wasn't really a shoe, it was a shoe resale company selling shoes that I got at a store called Last Chance. So in Phoenix, there's this store it's Nordstrom's, and it's called Last Chance. And it's where every returned item that you send, because Nordstrom has a very liberal return policy. So you can wear something and go, meh, I don't like this, and take it back, and they refund your money. Well, let's have to go somewhere. They all go to this store called Last Chance. Well, since Nordstrom has such nice things, I would go to the store and I'd buy primarily men's shoes, Allen Edmonds, Ferragamo's, Mephisto, some Bruno Magli, but not quite so much. Nicer men's shoes that were in really great condition, and I would just kind of clean them up and list them on eBay. And so I'd buy a pair of shoes for $20 and sell them for $200 on eBay.
Wow.
And I did that all through college until I got banned from the store.
They're like, you're coming in buying a lot of our shoes.
The story that's funny. So this is just
you threw out a side hustle idea for somebody. So
well, there was a ton of people doing it because I did shoes, but there were a ton of women doing like jeans and purses.
Really?
Because we would all like descend like locusts. We knew what day the shipment came, and it was in a mall. It's just a random store. It was in a mall. So this, the chain link gate would go up, and all of us would be sitting there looking at each other, and it's like boom, and everyone would just go in, and we knew what you're buying, so it's just like you'd fill your cart, then you go find a little corner, like Gollum, and you'd go through, and you're like, no, that'll work, and like then you pull 50 pairs of shoes in, and then you'd leave with 20 or something like that.
Did you have like a hood cape?
No, I mean, they knew what we were doing. The store did. They really, really did. The problem,
clearly, they banned you.
Well, what happened was I got the phone number for the vice president of marketing or the vice president of sales for Nordstrom. I don't know how I got it. Somehow I worked up and I arranged a phone call with this person because I just saw the opportunity that Nordstrom was missing.
Sure.
I'm like, you're selling these for $20. Like you don't need to be selling this stuff for $20. And so I got a phone call and I spent probably 20 minutes on the phone with them. And I just said, listen, there's a real opportunity here that I think you're missing out on. And this is, keep in mind, this is 2000, 2001. So the internet, we've just gone through the dot-com bubble burst. The internet as we know it today was not at all, not at all the same. Amazon was basically a bookseller at this point. eBay was really the only platform from an online sales standpoint. There just wasn't, that vision wasn't there because no one was doing it. People were building it, but that wasn't there. So I don't fault this individual, but in my conversation with him, he's like, this is not our model. That's not what we do. plus we have deals with these brands, and if we got caught selling used goods, it could cause some issues like this, and I just don't want you doing that. I'm just selling it. I'm like, well, all due respect, I'm buying the goods and reselling them. There's nothing. I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, he didn't like it, so I ended up getting banned from that store. So, and it was fine. I was getting ready to go to law school. It wasn't a big deal, but there we have it. So that was my first foray. Really, it was that online shoe business into the idea of working for yourself and putting in time where you have a direct result.
Yeah.
Where you can put in a way less hours. I mean, I'll never forget. One of my good friends is one of the founders of scrapbook.com. They've been very successful. And he and I were roommates with a third roommate who had gone and gotten a master's in accountancy and was working at one of the, I think Anderson, one of the big five at the time, big four now, big five. He would go to Phoenix every day. He'd get in traffic for an hour, go work on high-rise buildings and come back. And my buddy was building scrapbook.com and I was running a shoe business, and we would just sit by the pool with our laptops and work a few hours a day. And he would come home and see us by the pool, and he was like, I hate you both. You're making more money than me, and you're just sitting by the pool, and I'm going and doing this thing, in an office in Phoenix every single day. And it started to just really get me to think differently. And I still was on a path to go to law school, but I always intended to go to law school for business. That was kind of my vision. And so even though I went that route, I did it from an educational standpoint to reapply back to business.
How did you come up with the shoe business idea? How did you fall into it?
Yeah, it's not even my idea. I had a good friend, still to this day, who's actually been very successful himself as an entrepreneur. He's also an attorney. He was a patent attorney for Apple. He's been in Silicon Valley for a long time, and he has his own startups now that he does. And he had this idea, and he started doing it. But he's like, Matthew, there's plenty of room for more than just me. He's like, if you want to come join in, and so.
Was he doing it in Phoenix as well?
Yeah, so we were the two that did the shoes.
Okay.
So yeah, I can't take credit for it, unfortunately. It was his brilliant idea.
That's awesome. I love that idea. And then so from there you went into law school. Went through all that. And I remember when we met, you had told me a little bit of the story about getting out of law school and just realizing the contracts and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just not really
super exciting.
Yeah. Well, no, and I knew it. Honestly, I knew it going in. Because growing up in a family of lawyers, I knew what life in a law firm was like. And all of my fellow classmates in my cohort, I think they thought it was like Law and Order or Suits or any of these shows. And it's just, I'm like, guys, it's not like this. Like, that is not, I love my trial advocacy classes and my mediation arbitration classes when you're interacting with people and you're performing, for lack of a better word. I loved that. But sitting and reviewing contracts.
Oh. Yeah.
Oh, or some of the areas of law are just really hard. And we're dealing with people on their worst day.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just difficult, whether everything from criminal law to divorce, family law to, I mean, it's just hard. Contract disputes, corporations falling apart, patent litigation. It's just, it's tough. And so I never planned to practice law. In fact, it's funny, even the time that I spent 2 years working for the federal court. Even that was kind of an unintended funny thing. So I went to UNLV for law school, and I did good. Didn't do great. I didn't do bad. I was probably middle of the pack. I had a really good class, really smart guys I was with, and I did really well in some classes and just kind of middle of the road. But I don't even know what my GPA was when I left. But a friend of mine who was top of our class, or at least one of the tops, he had a federal clerkship, which is one of the premier things you can do out of law school. Clerking for a federal judge is, there's only a few roles, a couple thousand that happen every year. And they kind of set you up to go work for a big firm or work in all these other fields or be a professor if you wanted to yourself. Very coveted. And it's always the top of the top, Ivy League students and top of the class in other schools. So he had already had this clerkship set up. So it's basically in-house counsel for a judge. And he said, hey, I was talking to my judge, and this new judge just got appointed. You should go apply. I'm like, not sure if, he's like, just try. What does it hurt? And I was like, okay, how do I do that? And he's like, well, go to school, go down to UNLV and there's a placement department and talk to them, tell them what you want to do. And they'll just send your transcripts and everything you need. I'm like, oh, cool. So I went in, and I will never forget this. And I apologize to anyone at UNLV that's watching this, but this happened. And maybe it's a lesson to be learned, but I went in, and the individual said, yeah, we're not going to do that. And I said, what do you mean you're not going to do that? Yeah, we don't think you did well enough to represent our school in the light that we want. And so we're not going to send your transcripts. I'm like, what does that matter? Like, they can just turn me down. Like, this is the process.
Wow.
Let me be the one let me speak for myself. Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Sorry. Okay, well,
keepers.
tell an entrepreneur no and see what their response is, right?
So it's a fire right there.
So I'm like, okay. So
That's good.
yeah, that was the sound effect. Did that pick up? Did you get sound effect on that? That's great.
We'll add
I went home and I looked up online the judge's chamber's phone number, and he didn't have a secretary yet. And so he picked up.
Oh, wow.
And he said, hey, this is Judge Foley. And I said, hey, Judge. I said, I just graduated law school. I said, I understand you have a law clerk position open. And I said, I'd love to work for you. What do you need from me? And he's like, oh, well, actually, I don't really have it. I don't have a docket yet. Do you want to come in this morning and we can chat? I was like, yeah, I'd love to. So I came down, brought my transcripts, brought my resume, brought some referrals from other jobs and judges I'd worked for, and gave them all to him. And on the top, I just happened to extern during law school for one of his mentors and judge friends at the state court. He's like, oh yeah, we're good friends. And I was like, awesome. And we talked for 3 hours about nothing related to law at all.
Yeah, that's how to do it.
And I was just there being me, right? And all the back of my mind, I'm like, listen, some guy from Yale's getting his job. I'm not gonna get this. And so it ended. He's like, well, I guess I should probably do something else. He's like, well, I've got a whole stack. And he kind of pointed over to his desk and this huge stack of, resumes and things to go through. He's like, I guess I'll get back to you, probably when I have a secretary and everything and we can get through it. But it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. And I said, yeah, same. And I left thinking that's where it's going to end, because I'm not going to compete against someone. I mean, I'm not stupid, but I'm not the smartest person in the room.
But you have personality.
Maybe. So the funny part is what happened is probably 2 hours later that afternoon, I get a call. And I didn't recognize the number. It was blocked. And I pick up and it was him. It was the judge. And he said, hey, Matthew, I really hate interviewing people. Do you want the job? So I got to write. So yes, I said, absolutely. So I got this job. He never looked at my grades. He never looked at my transcripts. He never looked at anything. He just hired me based on the experience. And I obviously had to graduate law school. I wasn't a complete moron. But I got to write all the rejection letters for all of these students from Harvard and Yale from my own school that were worthy of being sent, unlike me.
Did you screenshot it and send it to the guy?
No, I didn't needle anything with it. But it's always been I don't tell that story a lot, but I think it's a profound thing for people to realize. And I know both of you have been in business, so you know this. Like, I don't care what someone's education is.
Right.
There are baseline requirements for sure. I don't want to go to some dude in a broken down Airstream with a sign that says doctor on it and go in and have him subscribe. Like, there is certain baselines.
Right.
But for so much of business, it just doesn't matter. Show me, don't tell me.
Right.
I'm going to believe you. So you tell me you can do something. I'm the I'll give you enough rope to hang yourself kind of person. Like, you say you can do that? Cool, let's do it. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. And then if you can't do it, well, then we're going to have a problem. But like, I'll give you a whole bunch of runway to prove it, because I've had that honor given to me, right? I've been able to prove myself, and people who like that experience with the judge, who just gave me the opportunity.
Yeah.
Just based on the interaction. So,
and I think the big thing there too is you had somebody else that told you no. And it's like, that's one pal. But there's plenty of others. Like, okay, that one doesn't work. Yeah, go around and roll this other one.
Totally.
And I love that.
Yeah.
And then it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out. And then I immediately left the practice of law. So that was all I did related to law, because I always wanted to get back into business. So
yeah,
that's when I went and started the import company in Vegas and kind of moved on from there.
Is the import company, is that the one that turned into the one that you sold?
No, the import company is the one that ended tragically in 2008 during the housing collapse, which we could talk about it.
Yeah, but let's talk about it. What was the business? Tell us about the business, what you did there.
So I started with a buddy from law school, and it was an import company for construction projects. So we basically brought in mostly doors, but doors, trim, construction materials for the big high-rise buildings that were going on. I don't know if you ever went to Vegas in 2006, 7, or 8, but the strip was exploding with construction, with that housing boom. That's when City Center was built. That's when Fontainebleau was started.
Yeah.
That's when Wynn kind of built his thing after selling the Bellagio. That's when just so much expansion was going. A lot of the old casinos were being imploded and new ones were being built. And of course, more construction has happened since, but it was the heyday for Las Vegas. What most people don't know is that the housing crisis of '08 actually started in '07 in Vegas and in Florida, where markets that were so construction heavy, so tourism heavy, people were already starting to act with their wallets, things that were deep seated in the economy. They were all operating on fake money. And so people, their spending behaviors started to reflect in consumerism and especially in travel and construction. And so in '07, we had millions of dollars in contracts outstanding with casinos that will go unnamed. It's not, you would know their names, but it's not relevant. We basically got one call after another that said, sorry, this isn't going to happen. They just had vertical steel on the strip and they said, we're not going to be placing, that order's not going to happen. And I had everything that I owned in that company.
Wow.
And so at the end of 2007, at let's say 27, somewhere between 26 and 28, I can't remember the exact age, around 27, I lost everything. I lost my house. The hardest thing, I think, the dignity side of it, right? When, as an entrepreneur, when you experience that first massive loss, and as one that had just come out of a professional career of having this prestigious law clerk position and going to law school, there was a perception of me that then was shattered to the public. And that's a hard thing personally to overcome. For sure. And so, my business partner, I wrote over my interest in the company to him because he wanted to still battle. And I just thought battling, again, unnamed mega corporations that it just made no sense. And so I left it all. So with my wife and my not even 1-year-old child, we moved in my parents' basement in Arizona and started over.
That's got to be tough sometimes. So if you're sitting there in the basement and you're like, life is just completely different now than what it was a while ago, right? And I think that sometimes can be something that it can be challenging to bounce back from.
Yeah.
Do you know Elizabeth Wilson?
Yes.
She's okay. So she was in here last week and she said one thing, and it was kind of about that just kind of struck me. And she was talking about being a beaver, and she goes, beavers just keep building. If something comes and just completely destroys the dam, beaver doesn't sit and think about it. They just go back to building.
Absolutely.
But that's hard to do when you have something like that, especially if it's your first big loss. And that's about the same time when I had mine.
Yeah.
And it's hard to come back from, because then you think, or at least I did for a minute, like, am I going to get there again?
Yeah.
I questioned that. I don't know if you had any of those.
Totally. Well, and in your 20s, it's so funny now. I remember your guys' ages. I'm 46, but it's
29.
29. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. 29 never looked so good. Because when you're that age and you're entrepreneurial minded and you're a go-getter, you don't see age, right? You put yourself in the same level as someone who's 60 and made it. Like, you're just grinding.
Sure.
You hustle. You're just trying to make your way in the world, and you don't perceive the world through age or success. You're just going to make it, and you're going to do it. And so when you have that soul-crushing event, you don't have the perspective yet to understand it's going to be okay. And you don't have the perspective to understand you have so much life ahead of you. I mean, it's been 20 plus years since then.
Yeah.
And I've had plenty of business successes and other little failures through that time. But like, I just didn't have the perspective at that age and the way I like to describe it to people, if I were to take the things I face now at 46 with this current company that I'm so excited about, and we've had great growth and onboarding, and the future is bright. Could be dark, but it seems bright. If I were to take the problems I face on a daily basis now and put them on the shoulders of that 26 or 27-year-old kid that was me, I would be in the corner in the fetal position, right? I would be rocking back and forth, breathing in a paper bag, totally unsure how to manage it. And so the advice I always give to people that Beaver example is perfect. It's like, it's okay. Like, if it's going to fail, let it fail. Move on, do the next thing. Be willing to work for free for a little while. Be willing to go to somebody else who you respect and say, hey, how can I be like you? What have you done? What can I learn from you? And just don't have the humility to recognize that you do not know everything.
Yeah.
And if you can keep that humility throughout all the business, regardless your success, I think it goes a really long way.
And fail quickly, you know.
Fail quickly, absolutely. And I was grateful that I at least had that wherewithal at that company to have that. You know, like I saw the writing on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Could I have spent 3 years in litigation? Yeah. Could I have potentially been awarded millions of dollars? Maybe. I don't know how I would have afforded the litigation, for one. What would have done to my family, to my wife? Like, it's just easier to step back, take the punch to the face and go, okay, that hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's done. Let's move on.
How did you get out of that moment? So when you're in the basement, how did you get out of that situation?
Yeah. So it started with the company actually I just sold. I've ran a lot of companies through the time, but I went to lunch with a friend trying to figure it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was in the basement. 2008 was not a very good time for hiring in a legal world because challenges existed everywhere. And so I went to lunch with this good friend of mine from college, and he was a contractor that was part owners in a company that was doing these things called shade sales, which I had never heard of. Mm. And they did some manufacturing, but most of the manufacturing in that industry was done overseas, China, South Africa, New Zealand, Korea some, but it wasn't done here. So we went to lunch and he just said, hey, Matthew, I think there's an opportunity in this industry to be a manufacturer if we can figure out how to make these. I've got some knowledge on this, but not a lot. You can figure it out. I think there's a business here. So I bought a sewing machine on Craigslist. And there's a funny story behind that.
I love that. That's awesome.
Well, it was Craigslist, so there's generally a funny story.
Yeah, it's I don't know that it's appropriate to share. You know what? It is appropriate. Everything's fair game. So this is what happened with the sewing machine.
It's the real world. People need to hear the real stories, right?
It's the salesman in me. So my friend and I played good cop, bad cop. Someone had the sewing machine listed on Craigslist, way overpriced. And knew these industrial machines were about $3,000, just shy of $3,000. And he had it listed like the price of new, but it was very used according to the description. So I called him up and I said, hey, I'll give you, I don't know what I said, like $800 or something for it. And he's like, no, that's way too little. And I said, well, but you're not using it. It's a used machine. And I'll come bring you $800 cash. And he said, no, it's not going to happen. And so my business partner's like, I got an idea. So he calls him up and offers him $100.
Yeah.
The story gets worse. He offers $100, and the guy's like, "That's obscene. How dare you, make this whole thing?" So we did the whole good cop, bad cop, and he kept, upping his number just a little bit, but still keeping it obscenely low. And I kept mine right around the same. And I called him back a little later and said, "Listen, my offer for $800 still stands." And he said, $900, it's yours. So $900 for this machine. So we went and got the machine. So we drive into this warehouse. This is where it gets bad.
Okay.
We drive into this warehouse. Please don't think ill of me. I didn't know. I drive into the warehouse in a truck, pick up the sewing machine, and there's this individual. I can't remember the name of the disease. I think it's thalidomide. The Billy Joel song talks about it. Children of thalidomide. He had like the little arms and little legs. So he was severely disabled. And I'm like, oh, heaven help me. It better not be that guy's sewing machine. So sure enough, we pulled to the back of this warehouse and it was this guy's sewing machine.
And you gave him $3,000.
And no, I didn't have $3,000. I just lost everything. All I had was the money that I had. And so and he agreed to it and everything. And turns out he had vastly modified the machine for his disability that totally damaged the machine. So it didn't work that well. So really, it was not even worth what we paid. But I felt terrible because I just negotiated blindly and it had come to terms, an offer and acceptance, an agreement had been made. But then I saw who it was and I felt so bad about that. But I didn't have any money to give him anymore and it wasn't really worth any more anyway. But so I got this machine. So that's my awful story that I've literally never shared in public. So now it's forever on the internet. I apologize.
I didn't mean harm by it.
I didn't mean any harm by it. I wasn't trying to go. No, it wasn't the point.
So it's okay.
Someone's screaming at the screen right now and is like, "You're a jerk." I'm sorry, I didn't know. So I get this machine, set it up in a garage, and basically hung a shingle, so to speak, built a website and said, "This is what we do now." And I learned everything I could about industrial sewing. So I cut and sewed these big pieces of fabric in a garage. And and sewed them on this machine and shipped them all over the country until I could we built up enough revenue that I could get a warehouse, hire an employee, hire a second. Eventually, after about 2 years, my friend who had run this other construction-based company sold his interest in that, came on and became my partner for the next 5 years or so as we grew it together. I then bought him out, and he decided to go back to school, go to an Ivy League school to get an MBA. And I ran it until 2000 and, what are we,
23?
23. I sold it, yeah. So 2 years ago, June. So just about a week or so from now is the actual 2-year mark. So I ran it to then, grew it to a company that did business all over the globe. So
wow.
My customer base at the end, at the time of selling, was Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. Like if any of you have been on a cruise, we did the entire private island of Coco Cay. Designed that,
Wow.
my team and I designed that, and we fabricated those and shipped them to a tiny island in the Atlantic, and
Wow.
done stadiums, done work for the Baltimore Orioles, for Google, Apple, SC Johnson Wax, Texas Instruments, done lots of their campus projects all over the world, and then islands and countries and commercial projects everywhere, even for a Russian oligarch.
Yeah. And don't forget the Las Vegas trip.
Yeah. Yeah, you want that story. Okay. So
we do before we go into that,
yeah.
though, I think it's interesting because sometimes people will see these companies that are hugely successful and not realize that, hey, it started just something extremely small, and you probably didn't realize that it was going to go to where it did.
No.
You just take day by day, and you do the best that you can that day, and then the next day you start over.
Yeah.
And you're just in the first couple of years are definitely a grind. They're definitely challenging, and you're trying to come up with capital and hiring an employee here and there, and then something happens, and all of a sudden it starts growing a little bit faster. But just that, don't be afraid to start small. Starting small is okay.
Absolutely. And start with what you know or what you can learn. That's always been a mantra of mine. I've always tried to learn every aspect of every company I've been involved in. I'm never going to be like with Tdoozs now. I'm never going to be a software developer, but I've tried my best to understand what it is that they're building and what mechanics are going in and being utilized to make something happen so that I can be a meaningful part of that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
In my last company, I became a certified welder, which is the story you're looking probably for me to lead into. We got a project for Caterpillar about year 2 or 3. So we're out of a garage at this point, but barely. And
how long did it take you to get out of the garage?
About a year.
About a year?
Yeah, about a year. Maybe slightly less, 10 months.
Where did you end up getting the capital to get that business off the ground?
What's interesting is we had a very small investment of like 30 grand from a friend of my friend. But the benefits of starting a business in 2008 were that everybody was desperate. So like the warehouse we had deferred rent for like 4 months.
Yeah.
They gave us an office to work in, office trailer to work in while they were TIing out their suite. So, those that have started companies in 2008, there are many, I have friends that are, generationally a little younger than me, that was their first foray into business. And like, they've seen nothing but success because they came in when everyone was licking their wounds or dead.
Yeah.
And so they're like, this is great. Like, and like they're stepping over bodies, as they're in business. But that was actually a really good time to start a company so long as, you could kind of shoestring things a little bit. So yeah, I didn't have to have a lot of capital, honestly. Other than that little investment, which we paid back right away. And he was never like an equity owner, but we paid that back very, very quickly in a matter of months. We had gotten wind that Caterpillar, their ConX, the construction expo that they do in Vegas every year, that they had a part of their show, they were wanting to do these shades. And they had reached out to us. They found us online because we had owned a marketing company at the same time. And so I had some experience doing internet marketing, and I kind of knew how to utilize SEO and SEM. Very different now than it was then, but to be able to boost you in the rankings. So they found us online. So we gave them the quote for this project. And we won the bid. And we were shocked that we won this bid. From what I recall, I want to say the whole thing was like 50 or 60 grand. Probably should have been 200, but it was like 50 or 60 grand. And we were just ecstatic that we won a job for Caterpillar. It was our first big name corporate client. And so it was awesome. All we had done to date was do all of the sewing. I built a proprietary process, me and my partner, on how to manufacture these shades that we still is implemented today with the company that I've sold, which made us kind of an industry leader with how we did things. but we hadn't done a lot of steel fabrication. And so when we had outsourced it to other people. So we took this job and we said, hey, here's all the steel fabricators we've used in the past, give us a quote. Well, our other quotes came back higher than the entire job was. So we're kind of going, oh man, this is, what did we do? We realized why we won it for one. So we realized, okay, well, we're gonna have to figure this out. So we got quotes on steel alone, and we're like, okay, just steel alone is actually significantly less. We can do this and fabricate and still make a little bit of money on this project. Let's do it. Let's fabricate ourselves. So my business partner and I spent about 2 weeks on YouTube studying welding, learning everything that we could about how to weld. MIG welding, for all those welders out there. There's lots of different positions and styles, and just purely MIG, the most entry level of welding, but we had to be able to be proficient in a few different positions. They're called angles that you're welding from. And so we spent 2 weeks, then we went to a welding supply shop and bought a welder and some wire and some gas and said, okay, we're in the steel fabrication business now. And had someone come certify us as welders. So I became a certified welder, and then we fabricated this whole job, fabricated it, powder coated it, and got it ready for shipment. And by the way, this job was a 50-50. We were going to get 50% of the money when we delivered steel and 50% when we delivered the fabric. So, but we had lots of bills. It's rob Peter to pay Paul kind of stuff with a startup like that. So we loaded all that. The project had large 10 by 10 steel plates that were about 1 3/4 inch thick, immensely heavy. And then all this powder coated steel for all the frames that were going up to the structures. But because they were building it in a parking lot, was the reason for these big steel plates. They had to the plates acted as the footing. So we had to bolt the structures onto these big metal plates, and they were going to bear the weight of the structure. Wow. So we loaded all in this trailer that I borrowed from a landscaping friend of mine, because we didn't have a trailer. And we went and rented a diesel truck to tow this big trailer, towing 20,000 pounds of steel, because we didn't have a truck. So we hitched it all up, and I pulled the short straw, and I got to drive the truck. So we drove every back road that we could possibly drive. We went, if you know the trip from Phoenix to Vegas, you go up the what's it called, the 95?
I don't remember the road. I've been on it, but
yeah, I've been on it too. I think it's 95. But we went down the freeway all the way to the California border, and then went up the little side roads through Needles and everything, because I didn't want any traffic. I didn't want anyone around me. I wanted to be like, we got up early and took the whole day. We just had to deliver it by 5 that night. So by around 5 o'clock or late 4:45 or so, we pull into Vegas right to rush hour traffic. And we get up to Sahara, that we're turning right on to come to Eastern, to then go south on Eastern, right by the convention center. So I am home stretch. I am a 1/4 mile away from my destination. I can literally, not figuratively see it, I can literally see where my destination and the check I need to make payroll is. And this little car, I can't remember what type of car, was on the side of me, and it kind of cut me off. And I got flustered for a second. I was like, okay, I could do this. And then this is because there's a wide turn to make with this, like a 40-foot trailer. And I start to make this turn. And as I'm making the turn, I feel this jerk, and I hear this, like, I'm not going to be good at sound effects, but like the Jurassic Park cable snapping, or like when the T-Rex comes through, the thing, it's like that sound. That did make sound effects anyway. That was close enough.
That was good.
And I look in my mirror, and I see the entire trailer lurch, and all of the steel dump into the middle of the intersection of Eastern and Sahara in rush hour traffic. Completely shutting down.
Everyone loves you, Matthew. Huh? Everyone loves you.
So I sat there gripping this wheel, just a couple years past the last massive failure, staring, because what I had done is I had hit the light pole, the street light signal pole, and sheared it clean in half, and lodged the pole or the trailer up against the pole, holding it on there and on all the steel. And so as I sat there in the truck, emotionless, I mean, I thought I was done. I mean, I sat there, cops start pulling up, the traffic coppers are overhead circling, intersections getting shut down, and they're rerunning traffic, and I'm just sitting here like this in this turn. And the police officer comes up to the window, and I roll down the window. Like, how you doing? I'm like, I'm good. Like, you're good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Wow. And so I got out, surveyed the damage, and And he gave me a ticket. And he said, you're handling this really well. I'm like, I am still past like feeling at this point. Like I was like, well, we couldn't, but by the way, I'm telling the story a little out of order. We tried to call to find forklifts, but there's no forklifts available. It was after 5. Everything was closed. All the rental companies were closed. So at about 5:15 or so, we had to call Caterpillar, who I can see, and have to say, hey, we're right down the street from you. We just hit a light pole and dumped your entire load of steel that we're bringing in the middle of the intersection. You got anything you can help us with? So this is burned into my mind, but I'm looking down Eastern and looking south on Eastern. I see these little forklifts, like clown cars. There's 3 of them. They're kind of doing this, coming down the road that's now shut down, of course. And they come and they lift the steel up on the trailer. We're able to get it away from the pole, drive it to the destination, and they offload all the steel. Fortunately, because I had those big plates, the powder-coated steel was only kind of scraped up.
Mm-hmm.
It was the big plates that destroyed the road and cut the pole in half. Those were not powder-coated. Those were going to be buried, so it didn't matter. And so I get there, we deliver the steel, and the guy on site for Caterpillar hands me a check. And I said, what's this for? And he said, well, the job. I said, yeah, but we damaged your stuff. And he said, and your show is in like a week. And he said, like last week, we had a giant excavator on the 4th story of a parking garage that we dumped off the top of the parking garage all the way to the ground. He's like, this is nothing. We're in the heavy machinery business. We deal with this all the time.
Wow.
And so,
well, I was just going to say, and he's like, and it's still a great deal, even though we had to come pick it up.
I had actually never thought about that till this moment. He was like, we got these guys. That's probably the turnabout of fair play of like me and the sewing machine story that I just shared, right? Like, that's
karma.
Yeah, it's all karma sometimes.
Repaying that debt.
But yeah, and he gave it to us, and I put it in my pocket, and I was just blown away. And I'll get to how the story ended in a second, but because I still had a ticket, which the ticket to fix a light pole in the street would have far exceeded the 20 grand or 25 grand that I had received for that job. So it was irrelevant really to me. In my mind, I still felt totally broken. And I was back in that basement, right? I was back feeling totally just destroyed. And so, when I talk about failure with people, and I've had other failures as well in my life, and I get to how this ends, but it's important to recognize that failure is good. Failure helps you. It teaches you. Sometimes failure is permanent. Sometimes it's not permanent. In the instance of this story, it wasn't permanent. I was very, very fortunate, clearly, because we already talked about how I ran it for years after and everything. So I got back to the office in Phoenix, and I pulled the ticket finally out after a day or so. I composed myself enough to address it, and I saw that my business partner's name was written on the ticket. And I thought, dang it. So I called up Las Vegas Metro, and I said, hey, can I talk to Officer so-and-so? His name was on the ticket. So he comes on, and I said, hey, you might remember me. I'm the guy that hit the light pole.
He's like, I'll never forget
He starts
you.
laughing, and he's like, yeah, I remember you. And I said, hey, that ticket that you wrote to me, you actually wrote to my business partner, and he was in the passenger seat. I was the one driving. I don't know how that confusion happened, but this shouldn't be on him. This is my fault. This is my bad. I'm the one that has to bear the brunt of this. And he said, I got quiet, and he said, okay, hold on for a second. So he went. He was gone for what seemed like an eternity. It was probably just 3 minutes, but probably 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But it seemed like forever. He comes back and he says, hey, Matthew, he said, don't worry about it. Officer, whatever. What do you mean, don't worry about it? I cut a light bulb in half, and I dug a trench through the middle of the asphalt from that steel as I rounded that corner. It's like, oh, I know. He said, but don't worry about it. He said, like a day later, like the next day, someone hit the pole, cut it clean off, all the way to the ground. They're on the hook for it. You're good. Yeah. And that same day, my business partner came in and presented me with a paint chip. So paint, when they paint the poles, they just paint over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this thick piece of paint from the light pole that he'd been saving for me when the moment was right to give me. And so I have this paint chip in a picture frame that hangs in my home office. He said, don't get emotional. I'm going to get emotional. And every time I have moments like that, and there's been many of them, personal, business, where you feel like you're sitting there in an intersection, figurative or otherwise, where your literal world has just come crashing down. And you think, how? I see no way out. We're barely functioning as a business where we have a bright future, but this is the end if I don't figure this out. And it's really hard to have perspective in that moment. unless you've been through it time and time again. And when you have been through it time and time again, you go,
That was
I don't
another
know.
day.
I don't know. Yeah. Like, yeah, exactly. Like everything could end. Yeah, it could.
Yeah.
So anyway, so how are we handling on those reports with this right here? Like, no, do you not understand? Like, we don't have the money for payroll Friday. Oh no, I heard you.
Yeah.
So what's going on with this right here? Like you start to gain that perspective. And I think that's just so key. And what you guys focus on so much on this podcast with business owners, and even the title, like Grindcast, right? Like the idea of grinding is not it's not a TikTok principle. That's not an Instagram thing. Grinding is not a fad that you do in the gym. Grinding is something you have to do every single day in your personal and public life. It's something you have to get up and decide, today I'm going to succeed. Today I'm going to give back. Today I'm going to serve others. And if you don't, I mean, I guess the warning I would give to people who think they want to start their own company or think they want to be in business, if you don't have that in you, or you don't think you might have that in you, boy, you better sorely rethink your strategy. And there's no shame in, I tell my kids all the time, just get a job, work for the man. Like, and I don't think any of them are wired that way either, but like I joke with them all the time about that, because it is a ride and you have to be willing and understanding to know that you can fail. No one is above failure. You can have the best idea. This business we built now, I am confident that it's going to be massive, but also someone else could swoop in. Yeah. Tomorrow Uber could go, and this is going on there, so maybe I shouldn't say this that publicly, but Uber could say, you know what, that's a good idea. We're going to do that. They've got the dev team and the money to go make that happen.
I don't think they're our audience yet.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. But I just think it's important. It's important perspective.
Uber will be for sale later on if you want to buy it.
Yeah, but right now, Uber, where are you? I look at this camera. Hey, Uber, it's you and me right now. This is not an official solicitation, and per the SEC regulations, I cannot make a public request for fundraising or otherwise. No, it's just you have to understand that failure is real, and it just it's less likely if you are savvy and smart and experienced and have capital. But there've been some really great companies. Look at Groupon. Look at I don't know if you know the story of Groupon at all. I can't rehearse it well enough to be dead on, but loosely, Groupon exploded into the scene. And they had a massive offer, I think from Yahoo, I could be remembering that wrong, but it was in the billions that they were offered to buy. But because of how quick of a trajectory, quick of the hockey stick that they had, from my perception, I of course was not in the room, I don't know, but from my perception, there was kind of well, we've got way more runway here that we can do. But then the market started to get flooded and more competitors came in, and Groupon, which still exists, which still makes hundreds of millions of dollars, is not anywhere near what it was because of market competition. Mm-hmm. So failure is a very real possibility, even if it's small failure, even if it's not total failure, and you need to be accepting of that if you're going to be an entrepreneur. If you're going to engage in small business, you're going to have conflict, you're going to have legal disputes, you're going to offend people when you didn't intend to offend people.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how hard you try to serve other people. And you guys are exemplary of this. It doesn't matter how much not exemplary of the negative, exemplary of the positive. Doesn't matter how hard you try to be community involved, community minded, lifting up someone else, lifting other people, helping fund companies, seed round, all that stuff. Like, it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, someone may perceive you as being a jerk. You may offend someone you didn't know. You may say something to someone, may say something on a podcast, right? It's like, oh boy, I shouldn't have said it that way. But that's just life.
Yeah.
And I always try to live by being real 100% of the time, because it's way easier to be honest and ethical and real than trying to figure out in that catalog of past experiences how I responded to a question one time or the other time, and figure out how to respond to this while corresponding to something else. I way rather engage with people who are real and people who are trying and engaging and grinding than those that just kind of passively sit back and don't involve themselves.
Yeah, I love that. It just makes me think that, like, there's always a threat that in any given time you feel like could cripple the business.
Yeah.
And if that can take over your mind, for sure. And you have to figure out a way to acknowledge that the threat's there and do what you can to minimize it, but it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
And so you got to have some thick skin. You got to be tough there, because if that just cripples you, there's no way you can move forward.
That's true. And it's a fear I live with at this company all the time. My wife probably more than me. Because she's not in the day to day. My wife, other than this last year, she did work in the special needs department at school. I have an amazing, wonderful wife who has raised our kids while I have been away, so to speak. And I can never say enough good about my wife. But these kinds of things are really hard for her, especially this business, when she sees the scope and scale of what this could be and the players that potentially I am battling against. I mean, Airbnb, and this is why even mentioning Uber, it is what it is. But like Airbnb just 2 weeks ago launched Airbnb services. So it's not the same thing, but Airbnb services is where you can get massage, haircut, things like that in conjunction with a stay. So they partner with local vendors. You can schedule on the Airbnb app now that, as well as experiences like a balloon ride or, whatever, all through the Airbnb app. And I see that, because of the failures I've had in the past, as a good thing. I welcome competition, because to me, I look at that and I go, we're over the target. We are where we need to be. And it always concerns me. Sure. Because you get big players and I know that someone can crush you. But also I know, listen, I'm a religious person, and however you want to talk about it, the universe has a plan for each of us. And so I'm a firm believer that you just keep moving forward. The Beaver example, I love that. I'm going to use that. You keep.
We're going to sell it. Yeah.
That's good. Your shirts. You gotta be careful.
I'm actually having pictures made in here for some of those quotes.
I love it,
because I'm like, oh, that was so good.
It is good. It's good. But you have to just keep moving forward. You have to believe in yourself and believe in your vision, and be honest with people about where you are, and be honest with your needs, and honest with what you believe can happen. And that will attract like-minded people. And then again, back to the notion of religion or the universe or whatever. And then what's going to happen and should happen is going to happen. And you just go along for the ride and continue to try to create. That's probably the thing. And I didn't think I was going to get this preachy in this, but that's probably the thing that I love more than anything else about business. And especially, to get mildly patriotic, in the United States, is if you want to be something, you can be something.
Yes.
If you want to go create, go create. No one is stopping you. Literally no one is stopping you. If you want to go get involved with real estate, cool, go get involved with real estate.
If you want to be a preacher, we're selling that too.
You want to be a preacher?
Yeah, we've got the little preacher things,
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
I'm just picturing it around your neck right now.
I wanted to go there.
Subscription. We'll do a subscription.
But if you want to be something in this world, in the United States, you can go make it happen. And that is amazing, because never through all of human history and all of time has there been a place and a time that's as ripe for that as now, as it is here. And yes, you're going to have failure. And yes, there's going to be setbacks. And yes, people are going to screw you. All that stuff is going to happen.
Yes.
But you still are in a place and time where you can make it happen. That's the message I give to every employee I've ever had that comes to me and says, hey, I'm thinking about this thing. I say, great, make it happen.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you, Matthew. What would you what are the steps that you would take when you're like, here's an idea, I want to get this moving? What would you tell somebody who was thinking like, I have this idea, I want to get this going? Like, how would they start?
Yeah, I would always say, don't start with money. Unless you've got it yourself and you're willing to burn it, don't go start by asking someone else for money. Start by working on the idea, fleshing out the idea, learning everything you can about that industry. If you're working a full-time job, keep that full-time job. Work before that job and after that job and on weekends. And learn everything you can about the thing that you're trying to create. What does your competition look like? What does the market cap look like? What is it that you're trying to build? How is your idea either novel or the same as everyone else? Like what is differentiating you? How are you disrupting the market? Learn everything you can, and then find a way to do it as cheaply as possible, whether that's partnering with people, whether that's doing it to where you're not making a dime as a business owner, but the partner or the vendor that's helping provide is making all the money. Great, start there. But do everything that you can to prove the point first. Then, once you've proven the concept, hopefully you've made some money on it. If you have, reinvest your own capital. I'm a firm believer, like Tdoozs, I haven't gotten a dime for Tdoozs. I've been working on it now for 2 years. I have spent, well, I jokingly tell all my team, a couple Ferraris worth of cash on building this. And I won't go into, because this isn't the place for that, of what we're doing now when it comes to fundraising, but I'm not a believer of going to someone with an idea. I want to go to someone with this is what I've built. This is what the market looks to be. This is what the results have been so far. And this is what I now need to get to here. Would you like to join in on this ride? I think that's how I operate. Everyone's not that way. A lot of people, especially in tech, especially kids right out of college, are, I have this great idea for an app, and then they just go raise money. I don't know. I have a hard time morally, ethically with that, because I feel like, I mean, everyone's a big boy and a big girl. They're putting their money, it's theirs to lose, I guess. But I always want people to know I have more skin in the game than anybody else, and that I have done everything I can to prove this thing and taken it as far as I can. And now, in order for it to get to here, which is going to be amazing for everybody, this is what I need. And so I think most people think they see a movie like Social Network, right? The story of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, and they just think that's how tech companies look. Well, I mean, it does occasionally, but that is just so rare. Yeah. But even that, Mark Zuckerberg and the other fellow founders dropped out of Harvard and moved in all together into a house in California and worked for nothing for years. Yep. Until they got that initial raise from, who was the guy?
I can't remember. I remember the story, but
I can see his face, and Peter Thiel, who I think was only like $300,000 or $400,000 that he invested in that. But it just took off, right? But that was after a lot of time.
Right.
So I just think you have to start small, and you have to learn and be of worth to the people that you're later going to A, be serving, and B, asking money from. Don't come as a leech with an idea, because as we kind of started off with, every entrepreneur's got a million ideas.
Right.
An idea is literally, I mean, it's not worth nothing, but it's worth pretty close to nothing. Unless you're able to enact that idea, unless you're able to grind through the early days of suffering, of making that, bringing that, breathing life into it.
Yeah.
It's just an idea.
I love that you say that, because I've had some people that have brought me ideas, and they're wanting, me to provide capital to fund them, or other people to fund them, and they don't have any, right? Or they're not putting anything into it.
Right.
And it's like they're not fully committed to the idea. Like, I'll do the idea if somebody else pays for it. And if somebody else doesn't pay for it, then I'm kind of out. And then I've seen them later on, like 6 months later, they're on to another idea. Yeah. And they're not really in it. But when you have it, you put your own capital in it, like, this is it. We're going to make this work. We're going to give it every shot that we've got to make it work. That's different. Even if you're looking at it from an investor, that's different investing in somebody like that, as opposed to somebody who's like, I've got 50 ideas, and just whichever one somebody throws money at, I'll go ahead and do it. But they're not going to stay when it gets hard, and it will get hard.
How scary is that for an investor?
Yeah.
When you see that, and you see that person's MO, I mean, I'm a figurative burn the ships kind of person when it comes to business. Like, I am all in. When I do something, it is everything. I am eat, sleep, and breathe in it. And I don't, you remember that movie Gattaca? You ever seen the movie Gattaca? This is a deep cut with Ethan Hawke and another guy, it's Stannis. There's a scene in that movie where they're brothers, with his brother, and they would swim out to the ocean, and they would play this game where they'd swim out as far as they could, and then whoever could make it the furthest into the ocean won. And he would win. Ethan Hawke's character would win every single time. And the question came up, well, how do you do this? He's like, because I don't leave anything for the return trip. He's I give it all on the way out with nothing on the return trip.
It sounds tricky.
It's a little tricky in the open ocean. Yes. And not a wise business practice. I don't use it in that regard. I just mean you need to commit to fully 100%. You need to put everything out there and not leave something to go, well, if this doesn't work out, then okay, cool, I'm going to do this little other idea I have. It's like, no, this is going to work out.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to make this succeed.
Yeah. I had
no backup plans.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I had a previous boyfriend, and there was one day he was like, well, what's your backup plan? I was like, I don't have a backup plan. I birthed those ships.
That's exactly right.
And I was a single mom. And so I was like, I have to make this work.
Yes.
Like I have to. There's no, hey, what about this thing? Like, no, I'm not doing that thing. I'm doing this thing.
Yeah.
Like every time I would, hang from that cliff with my pinky, like, oh shit, like, how am I going to make payroll? Oh shit, how am I going to pay rent? Like, you find a way, you make it happen. Something works out,
Yeah.
But that's only because of the drive of the thing, like I have to.
Yes.
So.
Do you find that it's different later on? Because what I mean by that is like when I was younger and I didn't have any money, I could go all in, like no backup plan. Like I've got to make this work. Now, I'd be a little hesitant on some things because I don't want to lose what I've accumulated.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so it's like I used to be like, there's just really abundant mindset, like let's just go for everything. But now it's like, hold on, I need to preserve.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose what I don't want to lose what I have.
And there's phases of life, right? For sure. Yes, it gets harder the older you get, for sure. Your appetite for that, like with Tdoozs, I don't know if I'll do this again. I mean, I'll always be an entrepreneur for sure. I will always invest in other people. I'll always be engaged, but this is a heavy lift.
Yeah.
This company, the scale of this is, I mean, it's way beyond me. I mean, lest anyone thinks I have so much hubris to think that I'm the guy that's going to now be on the business Wheaties box, the proverbial, like, no,
you never know.
Maybe, but there's a lot smarter people than me, and so I don't think that way about it. But the scale of this, and we're talking about a $600 billion industry. Yeah. We're talking about a home service sector that's about $300 billion a year. We captured 2% of that. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
And we have scope way beyond than just my 10-year plan is way beyond just, and we've talked about this off camera, it's way beyond just house cleaning. There's just so much more to it. And so it's got massive scale and massive scope. And that's going to take, and it is taking an immense amount of work because all of that vision must be baked in at day one. You can't just go along and go, oh, that's shiny, let's do that. Like you have to, like I have a roadmap for this. I know where I want this to be. But because of that, I think after this ride, my kids are getting old. At my 8, we talked off camera before too. I have an 18-year-old and 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And I love my children, and they have dealt with the life of an entrepreneur father.
Yeah.
And while I try really hard to engage, and I think I do a pretty decent job as a father, I would like to be more present, and especially during these years, and especially in their young adult lives, I want to be able to be present, to be able to help cheer on their dreams, right? I want to be able to be there and be present when my son has a business idea and I can go, cool. Yeah, let's figure this out. Let me tell you what I've learned. Like, let me help you create in this. Let me figure out a capital structure that doesn't become a crutch for you, but I can help enable growth when you need that. Like, I want to be able to do that the next chapter after this. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. All right, guys, that was amazing. So the website, Tdoozs.com. I'm going to pull that up really quick. Tdoozs, and it is in the App Store as well under Tdoozs, so you can try it out. Super cool. Yes, right. It's free. There. It's free. Not when you pay for a service, but
you pay for a service. But yes, the app is free,
and then you can check it out. Matt, thanks so much, man. This was awesome. You gave just some great advice, and so we appreciate you.
I appreciate it. My pleasure.
Yeah, cool.